Brian Lamar, I'm talking about sample. What better way to kind of close the day than talking about sample? Of course. I promise this will be, hopefully you'll learn something. We saw earlier, someone mentioned that the respondents are the lifeblood of the surveys. I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's super important to me. I'm very passionate about it. This is our class of 2000.
Woohoo!
Look at that. 6 of us are here. That's a full 25%. Can you pick out the 6 people in the room? Talk to me later at happy hour. Also, can you point out the person I photoshopped in there 20 minutes ago? The people in this picture probably would not have said that I would be presenting in this room today. I certainly wasn't student of the year. They probably would have said I would be presenting in our little basement computer lab. But I've had a great career in marketing research, and so what's going on in sample? I've been in research over 20 years, and I've been in sample for 7. I think I have a unique perspective. I work at a sample company that doesn't have any sample, which is a weird way to accept a job that we don't have the product that we sell. But I think it gives us a unique perspective on the industry. So part of my role is to understand technology and trends and the sample landscape. So that's what I'll talk about. So the way that we used to buy sample until a few years ago was really the top bullet points. That was it. You would call a sample an online panel company, and you'd buy a sample. And now there's all these new ways. This is within the past few years. So a lot of it is through an aggregator. There's lots of aggregators out there. A lot of programmatic sampling. Social media companies. You could buy from Google, from Amazon within the past few years. But now Facebook and Apple just released apps you can take surveys on through social media companies like that. Directly from a programming company. If you go to Qualtrics, you can buy sample. If you go to Focus Vision, Decipher, you can buy sample. And DIY tools, which I'll talk about more. But there's just lots of different ways to buy sample, which has created a lot of commoditization. And that's what, if you learn anything today, it's sample's not a commodity, okay? It's super important to understand that panels are very, very different. I'm gonna show you a little bit of data. I have 2 data slides. We ask an awareness question, and A through I are different panel companies. And this is awareness of lymphoma and leukemia society. You can see it ranges quite a bit. That's like a 40-point difference. And then is the gentleman from Coca-Cola still here? Okay, good. I'm gonna get a cease and desist. I make up concepts all the time and I test them. One of them is Coke concept because really I test it because it's a stable brand that you wouldn't see a lot of big, huge fluctuations in, so I can compare across lots of different periods of time. Again, panels A through I do 2 waves, that's why there's 2 bars there. I do it to see consistency. Again, you can see just huge differences in data between 2 waves. I talk about it, it's not good or bad, it's just different. And the reasons behind that are just because it's how they build their panels. There's lots of different ways to build a panel. How they manage their panel, how they administer survey invitations. Michael talked a little bit about this. A lot of people kind of know this, but you can take a survey from an email, you can take it from an app, you can go to a portal, and all of these things kind of change the data. So one of the things that I do is I try to reduce risk for our clients, and I think that, you could gamify the system, right? If you are working R&D for a company and you want a product to succeed, you could pick panel C, right? I felt like I could make a lot of money if I wanted to do that. If you wanted to kill it, you'd pick panel E, and that's true. I would test a lot of different concepts, and I see data. It's very consistent depending on what you put in front of people. Some panels just tend to rate things very, very high. Some rate things very, very low. It doesn't matter. I could put a car concept. I could put a rocket ship, and some people, 42%, will still want to buy it. Doesn't matter. So I don't know if you may have seen this. Don't shout it out. Who is this? It's a 70-year-old man from London, married a couple times, wealthy, 2 children, very successful. Who is this?
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, great guess. Branson. Oh my gosh, nobody's getting it. It's awesome. Prince Charles, there you go. Both of these people. Isn't that crazy? For the students in the front, that's Ozzy Osbourne. As you Google that, it's O-Z-Z-Y. May not be safe for school. But imagine one panel's building with maybe some Ozzy Osbournes, one's building with some Prince Charles. This kind of exemplifies that you might have different data, right? They're same demographically, but attitudinally, behaviorally, it could be very different. That's kind of an extreme example. I'm looking for a younger example, so if anyone has one. I've got one with Kanye, but it's not very good yet. So I need another one. So commoditization, write that down. Sample's not a commodity. Next point is mergers and acquisitions. Like we've seen in pretty much everywhere in marketing research, there's lots of mergers and acquisitions. Sampling is not immune to that. Here's a few. If you've heard of Dynata is not really a panel. I don't consider Dynata to be a panel. It's really a collection of a bunch of panels, okay? They're very different panels. SSI up there, if you've been in the industry as long as I have, you know SSI. Their heritage is in phone sample. Research Now was a very prominent panel, probably the best in the world. They all conformed to be Dynata. And you see some other mergers and acquisitions here. GfK acquired NetQuest, which is pretty big in Latin America. Nielsen acquired Harris-Poll and resold them. Kantar which is really a couple different panels, Lightspeed. They were bought by Bain Capital, and there's rumors of them splitting it all up. And the reason I put this up there is because, like I said, I want to reduce risk in the industry when I'm advising clients on sample. This can be a disruptor. And so the panels that are up there, if they're changing or there's a new owner, they could change how they're recruiting. They can change their budget for new panelists. Their data will change over time. That's one of my favorite things. I love when I hear about a new merger. Like Cint just acquired P2 Sample. I love it because I can track it and I can figure out what's happening. I feel like I know it before they do, which is really fun for me. I'm kind of nerd out on it. But keep that in mind that mergers and acquisitions, we talk about it, about people. I mean, it affects people, right? There's typically a reduction in workforce and efficiencies, but you should think about it also how it affects sample, ultimately how it affects your data and business decisions. So that's important. Next is sample quality and fraud. I could show lots of things about fraud. It exists, unfortunately. No panel is immune to it. If you're going to fire a panel because you think there's bad data, you're going to fire a lot of panels. You're eventually going to recycle them and start from the beginning again, because unfortunately, no one's immune to it. A lot of people talk about bots. I think it's a lot of, you can Google videos of people in China with survey bot farms. It's really kind of crazy to watch them. But I don't want to scare too many people. Sometimes I'm scared that people will cancel all their research after seeing this. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But there's a lot of fraud. But in terms of data quality, and nobody's immune to it. When I think of quality, I think of two things. I think, are you a real human being? First of all, which is kind of sad that we have to say that, are you actual human being taking a survey is the first thing. And then the second one is, are you engaged? Are you actually a good respondent? So we spend a lot of time on, are you a real person, unfortunately? Here's an example. This is a tracking study that we do. And so we typically use a lot of different panels, as you saw earlier. This is percent removed by panel. I put mobile up there because you can get different responses. As we saw earlier, I think Hillary showed that by type of device that you take the survey on, you can see differences in data. But the point of this is that quality is not immune, poor quality is not immune to any certain panel at all. Is anybody is Matt here or Lenny here from Green Book? This is I stole this from the Grit Report. And so if you know the Grit Report, it's the Green Book, and they take a survey of market researchers. I recommend everybody take it because you get a lot of cool stuff out of it. One of the things that we ask is sample quality getting better or worse? And this is interesting to me because you already get it. The people that buy the sample don't think it's getting better, but people that sell the sample think, oh, it's going great, right? It's kind of crazy to me. But the insight here, I think, is that the people that own the panels are investing a ton of money in improving quality. So keep that in mind too, it's tough. And a lot of the panels that are out there were built on in-person or telephone, and now all of a sudden they have these people coming in from China and building scripts, and as soon as you stop someone from cheating, the hackers are getting right around it almost immediately. So keep that in mind that data quality is really hard to stop. Every sample company spends way too much time on it. But it's getting better, I think. That we're hitting a turning point here soon. So I'll tell you why here in a second. Innovation, we've heard a lot about innovation today, so I'm not going to get too in-depth here. These are some of the companies that have a DIY tool to either buy sample or to buy sample along with like full service research. This is not all of them. Our sponsors can kind of do that as well. Some of them, I know that Kantar just released one I think last week, that you can do all kinds of different things programmatically through a DIY website, which is really crazy. You can buy all this different sample, which are all very different. And so what's happening is that you have a lot of people that might be a great researcher, but aren't experts in every facet of research, designing research. And so you see all the time, you've probably taken surveys where poor screeners, it's not the greatest survey in the world. It's because a lot of people that aren't classically trained, like the people that go to school here, are designing surveys. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. But that's a lot of companies. This is just part of them. But innovation is really driving a lot of this. Programmatic sampling is just huge. Another thing to point out is they're all buying and selling from each other, not just these companies. All of them are. That used to be kind of a secret, I think. But now I think it's open. Everybody's buying and selling from everybody. Very incestuous. They're all compete against each other, but buy and sell to each other. So I think one best practice is to try to get proprietary sample because you don't know where it's coming from. So ask lots of questions. That would be one piece of advice. We're all setting up APIs. So a lot of the sample companies are trying to connect with anybody and everybody so that their clients can buy a sample automatically without ever talking to a person. If you know researchers, a lot of us don't like talking to people. So in some ways, this is great. But it's not really best practice unless you really know what you're doing. And so APIs are huge. And now let's talk about future of sampling. I have a lot of time left. Trying to cut this out. Blockchain. So we haven't talked, I don't think we've talked a lot about blockchain, but I think we will start talking about it, at least in sampling next year. Is there some companies out there? There's Veriglyph. Who's here has heard of Veriglyph? Okay, a few people. Veriglyph is like an industry-wide solution. It's a collaborative effort with a lot of different sample companies and full-service companies and a lot of third-party data. They're all getting together to come up with a blockchain solution. And the blockchain, the benefits for market research and specifically to sampling should be improving that you are who you say you are. And so confirming someone's identity is huge. They say that will help validate people. We'll see. There are apps out there right now, if you've heard of UBD, Measure Protocol, and Veriglyph that will all have launched now or will launch in the next year or so that have blockchain technology. That will also increase incentives. That's a big part as well. So you can buy sample right now from certain sample providers for a 20-minute survey for about 75 cents, which is crazy to me. And so the commoditization of sample has really driven down the prices. And so imagine who would here take a survey for 20 minutes for 75 cents? That's not worth your time, right? And that's what we're buying it for. The incentive is probably a third of that. It's probably a quarter. And so incentives are a big problem. I think blockchain technology will help people have ownership of their data and will drive prices up for incentives. I think that will also help with the universe of people that are taking surveys. We should see that soon. And so the non-response bias, which we never talk about in marketing research anymore, it exists. But hopefully non-response bias will be reduced. More people taking surveys, paying more. Maybe it's just pie in the sky. But I think that the next couple of years, we'll see it kind of turn around. That people are getting paid more for their time. There's some people, I've always thought that one of my ideas for one of those Shark Tank was unionize panelists. Like, what if panelists go into union? And I thought, maybe I can make a lot of money out of this. A minimum wage for surveys, but minimum wage isn't that much more than we're already paying them, honestly. But they should be paying more for their time. Some companies are now paying for terminates, which is kind of new, which is nice. If you take a 12-minute screener and don't qualify for the survey, I think you should be paid for it. But the industry hasn't moved in that direction until recently. You might get paid a quarter or a dime for that. Hopefully blockchain will help in that respect. Drive up incentives, reduce numbers, has just a plethora of advantages to it, especially non-response bias. So keep that in mind. But I think blockchain will have a lot of other benefits I'll talk about. Let's see. Right now, it used to be that you do a survey and you would analyze just the survey data. It's 30 questions. We've talked a lot about this today. But this is kind of what I dream of when you have blockchain technology and all this programmatic and APIs working together, that you don't just have the survey data, you can connect everything. I think there's 4 gigabytes of data in your car every hour. So imagine if you're an auto manufacturer, you have 4 gigabytes of data every hour, every car, put that over time, and you can combine that to the survey data. I mean, that's incredible. And what if you combine that to your purchase behavior? What if you combine that to your phone and all the apps within our phone? And eventually, I think it's not going to replace survey data at all. All of this is just going to complement survey data. And so blockchain is helping drive this. You have new entrants into marketing research that are helping to drive this. A lot of them they're not new entrants into marketing research. They weren't designed that way. They're usually healthcare companies trying to solve other problems that we're just going to steal marketing research. We're going to take that technology and use it for our benefit. But imagine what this is going to do for research and insights and helping make better business decisions. I see this happening hopefully soon. But we heard earlier with GDPR and CCPA, which is happening in a month, that data privacy concerns. So there's going to be lots of challenges in sampling around data privacy, ownership of data, what we're allowing people to know about ourselves. A lot of this is from Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, which that was really what opened it up to like non-researchers. I think that we've been doing that for years. We've been taking data and using it without people's knowledge, and that was really the impetus to have more privacy. But keep in mind GDPR and CCPA. And I think someone mentioned earlier that lots of different states are doing stuff. Hopefully there's a federal legislation that gets passed to make it easier. And then best practices. First of all, please write down sample's not a commodity. It's super important to understand that you get what you pay for. You can make a poor business decision if you use the wrong sample. And again, it's not bad or good necessarily, it's just different. Expect more from your sample providers. You should be asking lots of questions to them. Is this proprietary sample? How was your panel built? How do you incentivize them? How often are they using mobile devices? How often do they get surveys? Lots of different questions you should be asking them. If they don't know the answer, ask somebody else. If they don't know the answer, then you should probably be working with somebody else. But demand transparency from them is super key, because a lot of times your day-to-day contact won't know the answer to these questions, and you have to kind of dig deep. And also, they should be partners, not vendors, because a lot of sample people, like myself, really want to help clients. And if we don't have knowledge of the situation, the business problem, we don't have a screener, we don't have a questionnaire, it creates a lot of challenges for us, okay? And then the last one, respond for people too. So I could do a whole presentation on respondent experience. We talked a little bit about making sure that your surveys are mobile friendly. They should be designed mobile first. Every survey should. I still see like 20% of surveys aren't designed thinking about mobile respondents. I once had an iPhone study that wasn't designed for mobile phones, which is pretty crazy. But response for people too. So keep that in mind. I always recommend people test all their surveys because first of all, it's the quality, but also trying to understand what a respondent goes through. Because a lot of times we're still doing 20, 30, 40-minute surveys online, and they're longer when you use a mobile device. It's harder to do, especially the grids. So there's best practices with mobile we could talk about if you want. I was quick, so can I want to take a few questions? Yeah? Just a couple. Thank you.
Simple question. How can you be sure that the sample that you're getting is representative?
The question was
of your target. Yeah. I mean, it gets down to the really fundamental of, people can answer questions, but it really only matters if they're representing who you want them to.
It's hard to answer because I think every panel is built differently, and you can have a different answer by panel. And it really gets back to, is that panel representative of the exterior universe, okay? And if they're all built differently, it's hard to really know. So for me, I always try to match to validate research to some sort of KPI and a norms database. That's the way that I recommend doing it. I do a lot of A/B testing. We typically build blends of sample, and you might have a different business action based upon the panel that you use. So, the answer is it's really hard to be 100% certain it's representative, because you can balance it all day long. You can have the best sample plan in the world, but if you don't know how that panel is building their sample plan, then it could not be representative. It's very common. Not a great answer.
We have one over here too.
So I was going to say, long-time listener, first-time caller, but you're not doing a podcast now, are you? I was really curious about your comments about how the cost of samples is going to go up with blockchain.
Yep.
I would think that your overall cost will go down because you'll actually have verified better quality sample, because we pay for a lot of crap.
Yep, that's right. I think it will go up. A lot of it is because of respondent incentives. And so I think that a lot of the blockchain companies are really driving respondent experience. And instead of, right now for consumer studies, I think the incentives are 15 to 25% of the CPI. So if you buy a piece of sample for $5, the respondent sees probably 30 cents to 75 cents. And a lot of blockchain companies feel like that's wrong. And so they're increasing incentives like a lot. And that's part of their strategy to build their panels to give people for their time. So I think it's going to drive, once people see the quality that it's going to bring, and maybe I'm optimistic about this, but once people see the quality that's going to bring and the validation of respondents and increased incentives, I think it's going to drive it back up. So I think you'll see this play out when you have the 50 to 75 cent samples versus the $5 samples. Will buyers pay that $5, which is a significant increase over that 75 cents, especially when you take that over thousands and thousands of pieces of sample, right? I think it is going to drive prices up, because it's going to force a lot of the current sample players to up their game as well, which they haven't. I don't think they've done a great job of. But thanks for listening to the podcast. Another one? Okay, back over here.
Hi. So you highlighted the differences that are inevitable across different individual panels.
Yes.
So in order to combat that, would you recommend that we use aggregators more often, or multi-source, or, just try and use a consistent source when we're looking across, tracking research and things like that? What's your highest recommendation there?
That's a great question. So first of all, we always recommend a strategic blend of multiple sources. That's probably what Burke recommends. A lot of companies out there, Directions would recommend that, usually 3 to 5 different sources of sample, because it reduces I call it sample source bias. And again, it's not good or bad, it's just different. So it has to be strategic. You don't want to pick the 3 to 5 that always rate things low. You don't want to pick the 3 to 5 that always rate things high. So it has to be a mixture, a really strong strategic blend. And the next thing I would do is also track it over time, because panels change. I could put a lot of slides up there, especially with mergers and acquisitions. And there's lots of reasons that panels will change, but they do change. And you can see that in the data. And so when I'm advising clients, I really want them, if they see differences in the data, it's not because of a sample source, it's because of marketing activities. So I think a 3 to 5, he talked about a 13, we do that as well, like 10 to, unfortunately, sometimes we have to do that, 10 to 15 different sample providers on it. It depends on the business objectives, the business needs, a lot of different factors, but I would always try to have 3 different sample providers on there that kind of complement each other. That's at its highest level, that's what I would recommend. One over here.
I apologize in advance if this is a stupid question, but can you explain a little bit sort of what blockchain is, and for that matter, how getting respondents that way versus in other panels, I know you mentioned a little bit in that, would aggregate things, how it's going to really make this better sample?
Yes. So one of the ways that, blockchain is, I look at it as it's the next internet. It's kind of the next level. And someone else, I'm sure there's people in this room, especially those that spoke earlier this morning, that know this better than I do. But the way I think about it is it's creating a ledger, and all of the ledger of a respondent, all their data is connected to each other and it's validated. And so let's say I'm a panelist and I would upload my ID, and it would verify it with my home address and lots of different third-party information. It would validate me and keep it on this blockchain. And that, therefore, buyers of the sample would have more confidence that I'm a real person. That's not done today. And so there's lots of different ways you can do that. In theory, that's what's going to happen. I'm not sure. Again, that might be me being very positive about it, but that's what they're doing. That's what they're building. is people are uploading passports and IDs and validating that against like Experian and other third parties, validating that. So we'll see.
So with that, if blockchain is storing all that information, does that get aggregated and then be available to the next research or that wants to tap into that data stream? I mean, is that an added value there?
Well, I think that traditional research, like ad hoc research, you would still have the privacy of whatever you're doing the research of. And so like if you're Coke and you're doing a survey with the respondents on the blockchain, Pepsi's not gonna be able to take that information. But other third-party data will be publicly available. And so maybe my purchase behavior that I use when I buy at Kroger or whatever, that might be on the blockchain for Pepsi or Coke or anybody to take. And so that's one of the things that they're trying to figure out is all of the business challenges like that. That's a good question too.
We're going to try to keep on track for time. You guys can ask follow-up questions, to Brian over drinks, which would be very exciting.
Thank you.